Alright, honor students, today you're making your model. To make your model, I'm going to walk you through this process, okay? The task is to analyze the problem you defined along with your research. So we need to think about, and to identify the problem, you're going to need to go to number 1, where you identified, or you wrote a statement outlining the problem. So I would scroll up, go check out your statement, and analyze and identify what is the problem you're supposed to analyze, okay? And then when you think about the research that you've done, this would be looking at number 4. And this is when Mrs. Hall came in and explained to us how we can use a number of resources to gather our information and record our research properly. So that's where you can go to look for your research. Using this statement, knowing the problem and knowing the information that we gathered in our research, as well as the CER, the claim that you made for what is causing the disease, you're going to make a model that shows how the disease was transmitted throughout the population. And then the second part of your model is how the body systems are working together to fight the infection. So there's really 2 systems that you're modeling in the form of one model, okay? So this is going to be kind of 2 parts. As stated below, this means that your model will consist of 2 interacting systems, all right? And this is a really important part of this unit, is understanding how systems interact, okay? How do we show interaction in a system? The way that you will show how these are interacting is by addressing the components of a system, such as inputs, outputs, controls, feedback loops, and components. All right, so this is by providing these 5 things, you will show how the 2 systems are interacting, okay? So to make our model, you've already developed a little bit of a plan, but we need to take some time and think about how are we going to map this onto a model, okay? So in this first system, we're going to have the disease transmission system. All right, I'm just going to write this down here. So for model number 1, we have the disease transmission model or system. I'm going to say system. And then our second part of our model is how the body system fights the infection. And in our disease transmission system, we have 4 key players. All right. The first is going to be the bacterium that carried the disease. We're going to have a rat. We're going to have a flea, or fleas, multiple fleas, and humans. All right. So these are the 4 key components of your first system. And the second component, I would like you to investigate 4 key parts of the body system that fight the infection. Okay, so you're going to model the immune system. However, we have not covered the immune system, but you do have a number of symptoms that you have investigated. So the immune system is going to utilize some of these symptoms. Oops, sorry, I spelled that wrong. Symptoms. Okay. It's going to utilize some of these symptoms to fight the infection. I would like you to investigate how. Okay, you're going to show how the symptoms are used to fight the infection. Okay. As you do a little bit of research, you might find that within the immune system, you find things like B cells, T cells, helper T cells, killer cells. Okay, I don't want you to include those. All right, these are way too complex for a grade 9 science level. This is what you would cover in AP biology. I would like you to include the general symptoms and how those are being used to fight the infection. And you've already done the research on those, okay? If this means doing a little more research on symptoms, then that's completely okay. All right. Now, as you include your symptoms, you're going to talk about a different hierarchy of organization, all right? And this is how our body systems, are organized within our body. We have organ systems, which would be the immune system. We have organs, tissues, and cells. If you can touch on these and just provide examples of these that are part of the body system fighting the infection, that is okay. Do you need to explain exactly what type of cells are being utilized here and how they interact and how the different parts of the cell work? No. Right? Like I said, a little too complex for you guys, but briefly covering the hierarchy of organization, showing how there might be different organs that interact in the immune system, which is going to be our organ system that you talk about. Okay, touching on the hierarchy of organization. Okay, symptoms, I already mentioned that. The symptoms are going to relate to some of the organ system, specifically the immune organ system. There'll be several organs that you might find in your symptoms that are working together. And tissues and cells, I'm going to say, is a little bit more complex. So if you don't get to tissues and cells, you will not lose points on that, okay? So now you've kind of got the two basic components of your model, okay? So you're going to have your disease transmission system showing how these four key players interact, and you're showing how they then, once a human is infected, how's the body system then going to fight the infection, okay? How are we going to show how these two systems, because these are two separate systems, how are we going to show that they interact? Through our components of a system, or the parts of a system, all right? So remember, we have inputs and outputs that are coming in and out of this system and are coming in and out of this system. So you need to talk about the inputs and outputs and show that in your model. Feedback loop. Is there any kind of a feedback loop that's seen in this model? In model number 1 or model number 2? Is there a feedback loop that you can identify? What is controlling these two systems? Okay, you should have two separate controls for these two systems. And then finally, system boundaries. What is the system boundary for both of these systems? All right, so you need to identify those four. And we've already kind of talked about the components of these two systems, but you also need to show that in your model, okay? I've given you a few of them. You need to show me in your model the components. All right, so this model then, you will be modeling two separate systems, showing interaction through the different parts of a system. And how are you going to show these relationships and these interactions? Through arrows and short annotations. I'm not looking for paragraphs. Remember, paragraphs are bad. That's a no-go. I should not see any paragraphs, and I should not see any labeled diagrams. Okay, we need to show the flow and the relationships in the systems. When you have a labeled diagram, you're just showing me what are the parts' names, okay? And this does not show relationship and interaction. We need to see relationship and interaction through arrows and annotations, which is very short descriptions or words, all right? As you work on your model, you are more than welcome to pop into or raise your hand and ask me for help, and I would be happy to come in. As you're working through your model, just remember you can do this digitally, whether you want to do it on a PowerPoint or if you want to do it on some other form of modeling. I would like you to approve it with me first, or you can do it hand drawn, which you will scan in and turn in, okay? So you can do it one of two ways. Looking at our next step of the procedure, we will talk about a little bit later, but you're going to suggest 2 preventative measures that will help avoid further outbreaks of the disease. All right, so this is 2 preventative measures. You must include 3 pieces of sufficient evidence. Now, we've talked about what makes evidence sufficient. Remember, we need it to be specific. All right, and we need to see how are the scientific ideas behind the evidence going to help prevent. Okay, so here you're really making a claim for one preventative measure is provide 3 pieces of sufficient evidence and then provide reasoning. This evidence supports my claim because, right? This is why you know that these 3 pieces of evidence will provide strength to your claim that this preventative measure is good. Okay, this is why the population should practice this preventative measure. All right, and then for number 2, same thing. Provide a claim. Another preventative measure is blah 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 blah. I know this based on 3 pieces of evidence, whether you've seen it in another population, whether it's been used as a scientific, it's scientifically supported. Okay, your evidence here can be a variety of things, but then you need to have reasoning to back it up. Okay, I know that this preventative measure will help the population avoid further outbreaks based on my evidence because. Okay, why will this work in Liberia? Okay, so this is number 7 and the last step of your project. Now, when we're looking at the rubric, you can use this rubric to assess your learning and assess have you met the expectations for our performance task. Okay, so distinguished, you'd think of an A. Proficient, you'd think of a B. Apprentice, you'd think of a C. And novice, you'd think of as a D. Okay, so if I'm thinking of these 4 categories of how I can do on my performance task, these are ways that you can assess how I'm going to grade your performance task. Okay, so number 6, when you're using a model or creating your model, to get an A, you need to show the relationships. Oh, I'm going to use a highlighter here. Highlighter. Okay. You're going to show the relationships of the participants and the transmission system. Ooh, we talked about those 4. And their roles are thoroughly explained. Now, you might think, Mrs. Trusler, I'm not supposed to provide paragraphs. What am I explaining? You're explaining the relationship through diagrams, arrows, direction of flow, and detailed but short annotations, okay? So the first part is showing the relationship in your first model. This is really your first model, okay? Second, your model shows the relationship between the disease transmission system and the human body system. So it's showing the relationships such as inputs, outputs, controls. How are those 2 relationships, how are those 2 systems interacting? All right, to get a B, you must show the relationships of the participants in the transmission system of disease and the human body system are demonstrated clearly through arrows, directions of flow, and simple annotations. Now, what's the difference between a B and an A? Okay, they're simply demonstrated, okay, but they're not explained as thoroughly. So I can kind of see that you've got an idea of how they're interacting, but in a distinguished model, I am finding very detailed annotations. I am finding clear explanation, and I can really see that relationship between the 2 systems. Okay, here it's a little bit less, you're showing a little bit less thorough understanding, okay, but you've met the expectation. You are showing the relationship in the participants and the human body system through a model. Okay, you have met the standard if you get a proficient. Now, apprentice, how will you get docked then to get a C? The components of the system are identifiable, the components of the system, okay, such as inputs, outputs, etc. However, the participants of the transmission of the disease and the human body system are associated with the components of the system, but I'm missing clear demonstration of how they are related. Okay, so you can just kind of show how they're vaguely related, but it's not as clear. Not clear. All right. Now, to get a D, you have missed something. Not all the components are included, so you're missing either 1, 2, or all of these. All right. and it's clear that you haven't put a lot of effort into this, okay? Either you're not demonstrating the relationship between the two systems, or you're missing the components of the system, all right? Because that's really what we're assessing in this model is, can you show me how systems interact through their various parts and pieces, okay? Now, for number 7, we're also grading number 7, okay? When you're resolving a problem. Your 2 appropriate solutions are provided to get an A. They're explained in detail and supported with sufficient evidence that addresses the underlying ideas. Okay, so you've got a claim, evidence, and reasoning, which are all good. Okay, you've shown claim, evidence, and reasoning, 3 pieces of evidence for your 2 solutions. To get a B, you have, oops, sorry, that's not a highlighter. To get a B, you have provided the solutions and you've just supported them with evidence. There's no reasoning. Ooh, that's a highlighter. Okay, your reasoning is missing. Okay. How does it relate to your claim? That's the part you're missing. Okay. To get a C, you have stated the problem, or the 2 solutions to the problem, but they're not explained very well, nor are they supported with evidence. So you're kind of stating your solution, but you're not backing it up with anything. No evidence, no reasoning, okay? And then to get a D, you didn't do anything. You didn't provide any solutions, or you answered the question incorrectly. All right, so make sure you read the question correctly as to what you are being asked to do, all right? We're also going to give you a grade for your citations and references. So providing correct MLA citation with minor or no errors, and you provide 5 or more references, get an A on that portion, okay? If you provide references and MLA citation styles with some errors, and you only provide 3 references, you will get a B. If you just provide your reference in a non-academic matter, so it's not cited using MLA citation style, or you only provide 1 or 2 references, that will get a C. And finally, you didn't do your references, you're going to get a D on that part, okay? Each of these sections are worth 10 points to get an A. 10, 10, 10. All right. The B category is out of 8, 8, 8, 5 for C, and then 2, 2, 2 for D, okay? So that means that this is out of 30 points total, okay? So you'll get a grade. Let me delete that. I won't delete. Come on. Okay, well, it's out of 30 points. And that will show you an example of how we're going to be grading your performance task, okay? If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. Otherwise, I will let you guys have at it.